I was actually in Champlain Towers, a couple of years before the collapse happened. And I was telling them, hey, this is not a waterproofing issue. You have a concrete repair issue. And I repeated that message over and over again. And we all know what happened. It was because, people didn't react the way that they were supposed to react to professionals telling them, you got a problem.
HOA Insights is brought to you by 5 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, Kevin Davis Insurance Services, and the Inspectors of Election. You'll find links to their website and social media in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. I'm Robert Nordlund, and I'm here today for episode number 161 with a special guest on the topic of caring for your buildings. Greg Batista, PE, is the owner and founder of G. Batista Engineering and Construction and has over 3 decades of experience. He's a trusted expert with a history of managing projects from design to completion, ranging from single-family homes to big high-rise communities. And it's his high-rise condominium experience where our careers intersected. I've got his book right here. YouTube viewers can see it. It's called Negligence: Averting Disaster at Your Building, Lessons Learned from the Champlain Towers South Collapse. He's a repeat guest expert who we've had on the show back on episode number 84. I'm on his email list and yes, I do enjoy reading your emails, Greg. I enjoy reading your email notices, and that's how I continue to learn things. And he's got always some novel ways boards can care for their buildings. Greg has a heart for being proactive about taking care of your buildings. I think you'll see that shortly. So if you have any buildings or common areas, we'll have something for you in today's program. Well, we're here weekly, so if you missed last week's episode number 160 or any other prior episode, take a moment after today's program to listen from our podcast website, HOAinsights.org, or watch on our YouTube channel. But better yet, subscribe from any of the major podcast platforms, or our YouTube channel, to give us a better chance to increase in the search engines. Becoming a subscriber increases the podcast position, which helps others find this free resource so they can be better equipped to lead their association. Those of you watching on YouTube can see the HOA Insights mug that I have here that I got from our merch store, which you can browse through from our HOAinsights.org website or the link in our show notes. And you'll find we have some great free stuff there, like board member Zoom backgrounds and some specialty items for sale like mugs. So go to the merch store, see what we have for sale, and at least download a free Zoom background to enjoy your next board meeting. Well, we enjoy hearing from you, responding to issues you are facing at your association. So if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or a question you'd like us to address, you can contact us, and please do, at 805-203-3130, or email us at podcast@hoainsights.org. Today's episode was inspired by Brian from Portland, who wrote, "We're trying to react in a timely manner to keep our building well maintained. But do you have suggestions or tools we can use to be proactive?" So, I'm back on the program. So, welcome, Greg. And any comments right here at the start for Brian?
Well, first of all, Robert, thank you for having me again on your show. It's such a treat to be back here and speaking with somebody that's so also, as well as me, so passionate about teaching the gospel and having people understand, the realities behind how buildings work and how they can work against you and most importantly, how you can take care of them before, bad things happen. My specialty is in concrete repair and the engineering behind how these repairs need to be done, especially with concrete. But, throughout my career and 30 plus, almost 40 years of doing this, you run across, if you're working with existing buildings, you run across a lot of maintenance items and things that, that if they get taken care of in a timely manner, we wouldn't have, the people wouldn't be in such a big mess, right? So it almost seems sometimes like you're always working against the clock. But there are certain systems and software out there that can be used on the property management level, or even on the level of certain companies. I don't know if over there in California you have this company they've got vans running around. A company called Maintenance. Okay. I don't mean this to be commercial, but these are people that they specialize in not only keeping a log of all of these issues that can come up, but being proactive and, in logging these things and repairing things, not only as they show up, but, be a little bit proactive. There are systems that are out there. Now, it doesn't necessarily fall within, my confines of concrete repair. That's only one small bit of maintenance part, which is, there's literally millions of things that can go wrong in a building. But yeah, there's a lot of good systems out there. You just do a good Google search and ask AI which one's the best systems for you, because, some have some pros and cons, and you just find the best ones is for you.
Yeah. Well, our audience they're in planned developments, big HOAs. They're in townhomes. They're in co-ops in New York. They're in mid-rises, little tiny beachfront 6-unit condo associations, and some high-rises. And oh boy, got some big sprawling HOAs, golf courses and water parks and all that kind of stuff in Texas. So lots of different kinds of things. But how about we start simple? You said one thing and about the companies that service the needs of your association. Is it usual or unusual that they're actually keeping track of what they're doing and how often so they can be proactive? Is that an expectation that you should start to have?
Oh no, not trust me. I've dealt with thousands of homeowner associations, and I think there's only one that has actually proactively used one of these people, and maybe it's because
Okay.
they use them that they don't have to call me up, because I typically show up when there's already problems. But
Yeah.
I know that they're out there. But the thing is that you're talking about some of these buildings that are, new and old and big and small and in different geographical areas. But there's one underlying theme here that envelops all of these buildings. It's that maintenance is thing. It's a big deal, especially if it's new, because if you have a new building, you have to still maintain your air conditioners, which you probably might want to do. They have motors that have moving parts that need special care. And if they're new, you have a good starting point, right? And you work from there. As opposed to if you have an older building, oh, let's start a maintenance log now. Then yeah, well, if it would have been done proactively, maybe in the beginning, then you probably wouldn't have nearly as many issues as you would otherwise have. So yeah, even if it's new, especially if it's new, you should start from ground zero. Start a good maintenance program.
So what I've learned so far is that it is just like Brian asked to start the episode. He says, we're reacting. Is there any way we can turn to being proactive? So you're saying that the average service company is also reactive. When you call to get something fixed, they come, they fix it, and then they wait until you call them next. There's very few that are logging that and will give you a call in 6 months saying, hey, we fixed your number 3 HVAC unit. It's probably time for us to view it again, double check it again. Okay, so that's not common, but it's probably a good idea. Number 2 is, and I got talking so much, maintenance happens, and you want to start early rather than late. So we could talk a lot about the mechanical equipment, the elevators, the blowers, the chillers, all that kind of stuff. But even the static items, the concrete, the balconies, the pool deck, I start to get shivers when I think about it, the planter boxes, those things may look static, but you can't beat Mother Nature and Father Time. So those things also need maintenance, right?
Of course. I mean, you got things that are semi-static, like windows and sliding glass doors. They're there, they don't move, but they have moving parts. And the moving parts, they're constantly, at the mercy of the high winds, depending on where you live, of course. But yes, and everything in between. I mean, it's everything basically is, to one point or another, is going to require some sort of maintenance.
Let's go all the way to simple. Let's talk about a small association or maybe even a big HOA that all they have is a little clubhouse with one restroom and a hot water heater. Aren't there little devices now that can detect when that hot water heater starts to fail and drip and leak that can alert you to that so you don't find out a week later?
Sure.
Tell me, start to talk about simple things like that.
Well, Okay, let's talk about that one that you just mentioned. Yeah, there are little devices where as soon as it feels some water, for example, you can put that little device inside the drain pan for the water heater. It's got little two little electrodes, and once some water falls in there, it closes the circuit, and you got alarm sounding, right?
Cool.
Even those kind of things, they require maintenance. So yes, there are all sorts of things out there, but every time I get asked these kind of questions, I always start at the low hanging fruit and what is the biggest bang for your buck, right? When you are maintaining your building. And I typically say it's the painting. Painting is something that it's basically you're putting a raincoat on your, like it's like you putting your raincoat on. You're gonna once you paint, you're, caulking in the joints, you're filling over any cracks because water gets in there, you get insect infestations, you get leaks, you get moisture intrusion. These things cause mold and cause a whole other plethora of issues. So if I were to say, hey, let's start out simple, let's start out with the low-hanging fruit that you get the most bang for your buck. Painting is definitely on the top of the list.
Fantastic. And painting's been around forever.
Yeah, everybody knows how to paint. You don't if you live in a small, duplex or triplex, you guys get together with your neighbors and you can do that. And just to make sure that what
Yeah. You make me nervous when you talk about volunteers doing that kind of stuff. But I think about with our clients, we talk about the idea of familiarity blindness, because when we come to a property once a year or once every third year, typically in the reserve study industry, we have fresh eyes. We can see the property. But for the board members and homeowners who see the property every day, what we find out is that they no longer see the property because they know that there's a crack in the sidewalk right by the mailbox. They know that you have to jiggle the pool gate twice to get it to open, and you begin to no longer see it because it has become familiar. So is that an issue that sometimes the homeowners just start to fail to see the obvious?
Yeah, of course. And
Okay.
it's human nature. I mean, even for me, we have a door outside that that it closes a storage place to, things that are valuable. And and the door, you have to actually ugh, and every time you open it up, it looks like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And my girlfriend tells me, Greg, this is a maintenance thing. You talk all this stuff about maintenance. Why don't you fix that door? And I said, Dad, don't worry about it. I got things to do. And the thing is, it doesn't bother me because I go in there, I start opening and closing. I don't see it as a problem. But
Yeah.
if it was on somebody else's, I put that on the list. Hey, you got to fix your door. But it's just human nature. So it definitely plays into it.
Yeah. My mom would tell me about the cobbler whose children never have good shoes. And that's the same thing because the cobbler's always busy working on someone else's shoes that he forgets to take care of his own kids' shoes. Okay. Low-hanging fruit is painting. So we're not even talking technology here. We're just talking about caring for your building and being, and I think we can use the word proactive. Don't wait until that paint is peeling and chipping and exposing the underlying. But I like that.
But it extends beyond the painting because as you paint, you're going to be looking at your building, right? You're going to be looking at it. You're going to see that there's a
Square foot by square foot. It forces you to see the building. Yeah.
correct. And the thing is, you take it further, as you're painting, you can see the caulking around your window when it's cracked, when it's chipped. It might allow like some kind of moisture to get in there. Like how many times are you going to be around your house? It's, oh, let me go check out the caulking today. That doesn't happen. It happens when you're actually looking at it. There might be a hole that what is that?
You're going to force me to write a note to go around my house now.
So, get your partner and, paint, and I guarantee you'll find some stuff. So yeah, in more than just the physical way that paint works, that it's a barrier. It allows you to, to see your building in a different light.
Now you got me entirely thinking. I thought we were going to talk about technologies and things like that, but this starts with the simple and the obvious and the ancient. So are we talking also about just fundamental maintenance type things? We're talking about cleaning the debris off your roof, make sure the gutters are clean. Is it that level of being proactive on the little things? that we need to start with?
It depends, because
Okay.
if you're walking around your building and you see a huge crack, then that's going to trigger, calling an engineer, and then, then you have to do a whole other set of other things. What I like to tell people is that, these are the kind of things that you and I sell, right? As a professional, we want people to do the right thing. But at the same time, we need to understand, and especially down here in Florida, we need to understand that people, there's a lot of people that are moving out because they can't afford the additional, insurances, or they can't afford the repairs that are required because of these 40-year recertifications that are coming up.
Right.
And
Catch up.
and people are very conscious about what these things cost. And I've been to meetings where people are like, they're almost crying. They say, we can't afford all these repairs. So, and my heart goes out to them. Even where I live here, the HOA has gone up 2.5 times. So I get that. So in getting that, that's when I try to motivate people to say, look, you can make the most impact with painting a building, and that will make the most impact. The lowest cost with the biggest impact. It's not that one's more important than the other. It's that I'm trying to put it in a way that people can say, hey, maybe we should, spend a little money, and that might get them to motivate them to keep going on other stuff. On the other side of the coin, though, you have places where we do see like a lot of spalling and concrete repair, and then we're talking about big bucks there, and when you get into that, that's when you get into the preventative technologies that we might be talking about in a bit, and about other ways that maintenance can be employed in order to minimize or do away with those kinds of future costs.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I think fundamentally it comes down to Mother Nature and Father Time are formidable opponents. Since the beginning of time, they have an incredible winning streak. But I appreciate your counsel. You need to start. And I think about what I hear in the airport, where they say, if you see something, do something. And I think there's so many board members that see, oh, that's a little crack. It was there last week. I don't need to worry about that. But they do need to call someone, because that may be an indication of something much more significant. And if you stop it now, it may be a caulking project. If you don't stop it now, it may be a very expensive repair project, or even a local rebuild. And so I want to make sure we're communicating that message loud and clear. Is that fair?
No, of course. And just exactly what you're talking about is one of the underlying themes of the book, right?
Yep.
Because, I was actually in Champlain Towers, a couple of years before the collapse happened. And I was telling them, hey, this is not a waterproofing issue. You have a concrete repair issue.
Yeah.
And I repeated that message over and over again. And we all know what happened. It was because, people didn't react the way that they were supposed to react to professionals telling them, you got a problem. And that's the underlying theme in the book, is that, look, if you see something, say something. And when you talk to a professional, you should pay attention to them.
I want to make sure our audience hears that we need to learn the lessons of those that come before us. And the Champlain Tower South people, they saw it, they got used to it. They got slowed down at the very end by COVID. That slowed down their construction bid process and their loan process, and just some bad timing and bad circumstances that led to 98 people dying. But we want, again, this is why you're on the program, because we feel we're concerned about these buildings. But I'm looking at the time here. It's time for us to take a quick break to hear from one of our generous sponsors, after which we'll be back with more common sense about maintaining your common areas.
Numbers matter, and we need numbers like game scores and bank balances to let us know where we stand. The same is true for your association. Is yours thriving or struggling? Let me introduce you to the FiPhO Health Score, like your own personal FICO credit score. Now in one simple number, owners and boards can learn the combined financial, physical, and operational health of their association. The good news, it's free at ourfipho.com. That's our, FIPHO.com. Learn how your association measures up.
And we're back. Well, during the break, Greg and I were talking about what we want to prioritize for the second half of the show. And Greg said it earlier, he's a concrete guy. That's kind of his specialty. He warned me that we could have multiple episodes talking about various concrete issues, but I want to make sure we talk about the big things. So first off, let's talk about spalling. What can you tell our board members what spalling is and why it's significant?
The spalling is just basically the concrete breaking underneath, over pressure that's happening on the inside of the concrete. So let me explain a little bit better so you get a visual feel for what I'm talking about. If you have a piece of concrete, a solid piece of concrete, and you have a piece of steel running inside of it,
Okay.
a piece of steel is completely embedded in the concrete.
Right, the rebar that we commonly see.
Correct, the rebar.
Yeah.
And that's just basically, it's steel, and steel rusts. Now, what happens is that once you get water getting into the concrete, concrete is really, if you look at it through a microscope, it's basically like a sponge. It's got a bunch of little holes in it, and water eventually gets entrained in moisture, and it gets to the rebar, right?
Okay, so concrete is porous, and as you said earlier, we need to prioritize painting, which now my brain is putting these things together, keeps the water from getting into the concrete.
That is absolutely right. I mean, it's a lot more complex than that, but
yeah,
at its very basis, that's exactly what's going on. Because the same way that water gets in, chlorides get in, and these different chemicals that break down not only the concrete, but they break down they start the process for the corrosion of the steel. But anyway, but the thing is that once that the chlorides, and you have that chemical reaction that the rust starts to develop. What happens to rust when it gets really rusty? It expands. It gets fatter. It gets fatter. And those forces that are induced inside that concrete, once it starts to expand, eventually it's not going to take the force anymore. You're going to have a piece of concrete just pop out because and then you have a piece of steel that takes up 7 times its mass, 7 times its diameter. Just because it gets it's rusting. So as it grows, it's going to bust out the concrete somewhere. So that's eventually what a spall is. The spall in the strict sense of the word is the actual piece of concrete just falling out of the beam or column or whatever you want to call it.
So if you hit a piece of concrete with a hammer, then you can chip a little piece off. But when it happens from the inside, it's a spall.
Well, the spall happens because it's the piece of concrete that it gets detached from the underlying layer, right? Okay. If you hit it with a hammer, it's going to fall by itself. But sometimes it's just precariously right next to falling down. That if you look at it the wrong way or there's rain, it's gonna fall down by itself.
You realize you got me biting my lip here because I'm feeling danger to a building, and it's starting to creep me out.
Well, when you're in this line of work, you're constantly looking up. You're going by these buildings, and literally, that's what happens. So that's what happens when you're in this line of work.
Okay, so we're talking about the vertical surface where you would think that water would run down, but enough of it seeps in that it causes problems. And I imagine that's true for balcony surfaces, pool decks, planter boxes, everything like that?
Yes, absolutely. And especially on the horizontal surfaces where you typically have waterproofing.
Okay. Standing water.
Yeah, you can have standing water.
Or even the water that drains. It's there for some period of time.
And you have paint that covers your wall, but then you have waterproofing where you are going to get maybe some standing little, what we call bird baths.
Okay.
You have them standing there, but you need something that's a little bit more strong than, what you would have on a vertical surface, which is a wall. So, we can include waterproofing in the same conversation that we had a few minutes ago as far as protecting your envelope and putting that raincoat on.
Good. And I would imagine that extends then to parking decks?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Parking decks are, they typically don't get painted inside a lot of times. So, it's got, especially when you have ones that are near the coast, they tend to have that, those problems, as far as the spalling.
Okay. So cars are exposed to rain, exposed to moisture, they drive in, and 2 things go on. The car comes in and drips onto the concrete. And then when you're turning the corners, you're rubbing and smearing the concrete hard on any surface protection. I guess there's a third thing. When the car then comes to a stop, it drips oil and other things. Oh, gee, there's more. What if it's a Tesla? it's not dripping oil, but isn't a Tesla way heavier than the average gasoline powered car?
No, I wouldn't know that. That's a
Okay,
good question.
I think it is. And that adds a structural load. So the concrete is going to sag and deflect, and every time it deflects, it's like a piece of paper that you bend and bend and bend and bend and bend, and eventually that puts more stress on it and more concern and closer or more of an opportunity to initiate a crack. Okay, a lot of things going on. So,
Yeah.
tell me about, is this something that is safe in the board member's hand, or do they need an outside set of eyes to see it clearly?
I always say, if you see something, say something, because,
Yeah.
The people that are on the board, they walk around, they're the first ones to see a crack where there probably wasn't one there, a week before or a month before. And, you depend a lot on that kind of feedback. A lot of the calls that I get are because somebody has seen something and they're saying, hey, at least look into it, and it's something that I take, very, very seriously when a lot of times when, somebody calls and says, oh, I have a small crack, but I don't think it's anything. So, well, you're taking the right step, and a lot of times I say, look, just take a picture of it. Let me see it, because that might get, a conversation going. At times I can just see a crack. I know immediately what it is. Oh, that's not a load bearing wall. Just forget about it. That's fine. But have that conversation, to start off with, to begin with.
Yeah, well, you're the one who can discern that, because to a board member, it may just be a crack. I got a couple more ideas. One is, if you see something, get a picture of it and tell your professional. Hopefully you have a structural professional, I don't want to say at your beck and call, but someone that you refer to that has a file on your building. And you can say, this is what this thing looked like on, January 15th. And put yourself a note to take a picture February 15th, March 15th.
Mhm.
Is that a good thing that you can do to empower the professional to know, is it moving? Is it changing? Is that maybe something that a board member can do?
No, absolutely. But it depends on the crack. You get to a point in your career where you can see something and you can say, oh, 99.99%, that's nothing. Then there's, oh my God, that's a huge problem. Or typically it almost falls somewhere in the gray side, right? And what I do with my clients, people that have been, hiring me for the past 10 years or plus, that, I'm able to tell them something like, look, it's going to cost you $1,000 to get me out there to look at this thing. But this is what I suggest for now. Just, mark off that, because, sometimes they tell me, hey, that crack wasn't there, 2 weeks ago. It might be in their head. It might not be in their head, right? What I tell them is, look, get something and scratch where the crack ends. Let's wait a little bit. And if you see that it extends beyond that point in the next several months or whatever, you know what, then we'll go take a look at it. Because, it's, I'm trying to help my clients, in a way that I find in my engineering judgment to be, reasonable. But the important thing is that they're calling me. A lot of people don't like to call engineers because all of a sudden they say, okay, this guy's is $1,000 here. I don't want to do that. And they risk their safety to perhaps, save themselves a few bucks. So I like to think that I have a good enough rapport with these people that they have the confidence to, to talk to me and, be able to air out these possible issues.
I like what you're saying. We want to make sure our board member audience feels like they have power, like they have agency, that they can control things. But obviously they're not experts. So I like your idea of, if you see a crack, Sharpie mark it small where the crack ends, and then you'll know if the crack's getting bigger. Work with your professional. But in the past, we've had a theme here of the 4 C's that we encourage our board members to have. One is to care. You got to care about your building. You need to be curious. What is that? Is that significant? Then you need to be courageous. What am I going to do? What do I need to do? And number 4 is communicate. And those are 4 principles, and I see those in my brain right now. And I want to make sure our audience here is challenged to be courageous here and not be part of the problem in just saying, oh, that's no big deal. I don't think that's the board member's role. I think that is I want to be clear, your role as the structural consultant. You can help them. I appreciate your spirit. You have nonprofit client. Our entire community association industry are nonprofit clients, and you can work with them. You can say, take a picture, mark it with a Sharpie, give it a little scratch, and then call me in a month. I like that. That gives agency. The board members showing that they care. Are we on the right track here?
No, I absolutely love what you're saying, because I like to think it's because I care.
Yeah.
And I like to treat my clients with a certain way. I'm not your typical engineer that's very, take themselves too seriously and walk around like, no, I like to think of myself as somebody that's approachable. Right. And it starts with this whole thing that I have with my books online and everything that basically teaches you a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily have to call me, but all this stuff is out there. And there's one theme that everybody, people tell me, oh my God, all these people on these, they're crazy, they're insane, they're this, they're that. And I always tell them, look, 99.99% of these people that are on these boards, they're good people. They really, really want to do the right thing. The vast majority of them, of course, there's going to be a couple of kooks in there, mixed in there somewhere, because they come out every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gone 99.9. I might have gone 98.
That might be in California. That's like California water.
There we go. We got 95% in California, 99.9 in Florida. So it's a national average of something nice and high.
Exactly. But when you get to Miami, it becomes like 75%.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyway, you got
we're still being recorded here, so this is still part of the show. Let's get back on track.
We own it.
Yeah,
in Florida, we own it. We own our crazy.
Okay.
So, the about the C's that you talked about, and in me saying that these are good people because they honestly care. The big question comes up is, yeah, they care, but more often than not, it's the financial issue that comes up.
Yeah.
And they care about themselves and having to spend all this money, but they also care about, the buildings that they live in.
Yeah. They're get past that courageous hump.
And that's where the courageous part comes in, because not only is it a money issue, but then, these people, God bless them, they're volunteers and they put themselves on the firing line, because all of a sudden, they got half the people that live there, you got them, as an enemy right now, because they want to spend, and they're probably, they're probably paying the engineer or the contractors under the table. It's probably his brother, and that's how things work. So yes, you got courageous, and you got to do it because you care. And the basic tool that you have, that anybody has, whether it's me, the contractors, or the homeowners, or the people on the board, is communication. Because that's the only way that you're able to deal with all these issues. So everybody comes out with, not insane. But I love that. I love that concept of the C's. That's actually beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think it resonates with you. You live in a community association, so you get it. But this is the world. Hey, Greg, this has been so fun to have you on the program. It's an excuse for me just to spend some time talking with you and having a bunch of other people listen in on what we're talking about. Thanks for sharing some of your insights about taking good care of your buildings. But it is time to wrap this up. Any closing thoughts to add at this time?
The only closing thought that comes into my head right now is that this is truly a treat. Right. And I know that you have in your podcast and stuff, and I tried to start a podcast before, and it's just so much work. It's so much work, and people don't realize that. So I understand what you're going through, and I would hope that this is not the last one. I like the dynamic between us, and I know that between your expertise and mine, we have a lot to apport to everybody out there. So
there'll be another episode.
I really look forward to it, Robert. So thank you for having me on once more.
Cool. Greg, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. I appreciate your expertise and realizing we both care about community association buildings and those board members. And so you resonate with what we're trying to do here on the show. If you're in Florida and you want to get in touch with Greg and his company, you can reach him through his website at askgbatista, that's BATISTA.com. Well, we certainly hope you learned some HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense to your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comments section on our YouTube video. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@hoainsights.org or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that sponsor this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.